Well, hello everybody. Day 7, and I'm gonna start with a super quick public service announcement kind of thing. I normally do videos every week announcing the dates and maybe updating people on what is going on with the YouTube channel, with the stream, with the plans and stuff like that. I'm still gonna do those for the pilot season. I'm still figuring out how to communicate with the actual viewership, but those don't seem to get a ton of views, and so I thought I'd actually, whereas the videos actually do, so I thought I'd actually put these at the head of the video, ramble on for a couple of minutes, and then we'll actually get on to doing stuff. So if you want to know when the streams are and if we're ever gonna do something other than streams, any other events, on www.cultofreak.com there's a page called Stream Calendar. You can find it here, you can punch it in here. This is a Google Calendar which is in my time zone, but if you import it, or if you import the events, you can change them to your time zone, and obviously you can get notifications and all of that if you wish. So this is the best way to know when stuff is happening. I am gonna, and also unlike the videos, I can update these if anything happens. So this is by far the best way to keep in touch with what is going on with the streams and any other events. Now always, and this is for the YouTube guys, if you're on the stream, thank you. There's a few loyal supporters, including like Germany is absolutely outdoing everybody else. It's a terrible time for Europe. It's 3 a.m. and I know quite a few people that set their alarm at like 2 a.m. wake up, do stuff for a little bit, watch the stream, and then go back to bed at like 4:30 a.m. Thank you. If you're one of those people, you're one of my heroes. Now if you're watching this on YouTube, now for this stuff to actually work out, for me to do first season, and eventually other seasons after that, if things turn out well, I do need audience, I do need viewership, and it's this is free. It's gonna stay free. That's not gonna change whether I monetize the videos or not. That doesn't matter. That pulls in cents unless you're pulling in millions of views. But the main thing is, for this to go on, I basically need the viewership as leverage if I ever want to get some form of sponsorship in the form of licenses or co-promotion from some vendor or something like that. So looking at the YouTube views, the YouTube channel has actually been going pretty well by any standard for something so niche. It's going really well. There's like the first video pulled in like 2,000 something views in like 2 weeks. The second one has broken 1K. Interestingly, and this makes me happy, the math videos actually pick up faster than any of the other videos. So obviously there's an interest for the technical material. That's great. But the funny thing is that most of the views actually come from non-subscribers, and of those only just about half come from direct searches. So a lot of non-subscriber views are going to be stuff like people that are at work and they can't log in with their Gmail account, or they don't, or they just want to go on YouTube. But there's about probably a quarter of the views that come from people that don't subscribe to the channel. If you like the series and you want to see it go on, please do stuff like, and it's the silly thing that when you watch YouTubers, they always go, oh, subscribe and like and share, it helps. It's not until you actually do these that you understand what they mean, and it's nothing to do with a popularity contest or anything like that. It's entirely you basically need your videos to come up in several lists so that they go, not quite viral, but it's the same principle. It's like the more things flag that video positively with YouTube, which is likes, and funnily enough these likes as well, comments, shares, subscriptions, notifications, I don't think make much difference, the more that video gets suggested to other people. So this is pretty much all I wanted to say. I've rambled on for 4 minutes. I reckon it's time to get started with these. But yeah, that's it. If you want to support these, all I ask of you is that you actually do subscribe to the channel, that you do like the videos if you can, retweet the stuff, and it's nothing to do with popularity. It's got everything to do with actually getting the viewership, which is going to be my bargaining chip to get other people involved in these to support it. So without further ado, now I want to do a couple of things today, and let me check a couple of things in the stream real quick. Yeah, health seems good, audio seems good, we should be alright. So there's a couple of things I want to do today, which is cleaning up the rig, but also introduce a little bit more matrix math. And yeah, some people in chat were saying, didn't know it worked like that. I'm gonna drop some likes and comments. Yeah, thanks guys. So yeah, it's a funny thing. It's I mean, obviously some people do it because they crave the popularity and not particularly fond of that. But the system is entirely popularity driven, so you gotta play that game if you want to succeed. Now, we have introduced very quickly, and I'm not gonna do more. I've been chomping at the bit to do more, but this is a little bit too advanced and I don't want to overload people. We've been introducing matrices, which are notionally pretty simple. I mean, you have your X and Y and Z axis, and each of these basically maps to a row in the matrix, and that's your orientation, and you could consider it the scale as well, because the magnitude of each vector could be representing the scale on that axis. So actually I've been doing that one wrong. And again, Maya uses row matrices. We did mention notation. So, and this is pretty much when you get a 16 scalars matrix, which is 4 by 4, this is what you get. Now, and there's a fourth term, so if this is the orientation of your object and that object has been displaced away from the word center by a certain amount, then that displacement is the stuff that goes in the fourth row. Now, talking about matrices, there's a couple of things we did mention. So if a matrix is the one that has moved, let's say this is the word center, a matrix is the thingy that describes the movement of an object. So if we go back to Maya for a second, when you have a transform in Maya, any object that has been moved around, so this has been offset from the center by this much, and possibly it's been rotated as well, the effect necessary to reach that point is described as a matrix at most times. You will see it as the decomposed version, which gets you Euler angles and translation as displacement and the scale on free axis, but under the hood. So there is some matrix that describes how that object got there, which is a displacement for that and maybe a rotation on one or more axes. We did mention inversion of a matrix. So as there is an effort that gets whatever you're transforming by the matrix. So remember, this just describes whatever is required to get to that point. If you want to invert that, so if you want to find out, okay, what would it take to get this thing back towards center and to realign it on this axis in some way so that we get a word aligned matrix, that is the inverse of that matrix. So if you take this item and the classic notation you find usually when there are mixes of scalars, vectors, and matrices, very often you find that matrices are indicated with an uppercase letter. This is not always true, and it's highly subjective to what you read, but most material will have matrices as an uppercase letter if there is a point that gets multiplied by those things. So if it's a vector that is compatible with that matrix, which means one of the two dimensions is the same. It will be often indicated as a bold letter, and if you have a scalar of some sorts, normally they will forego symbols for the multiplications and just pair it, and that will be non-bold and lowercase. So if you want I guess in a way it's the reciprocal effort, so whatever it takes to bring whatever object was transformed by this matrix back to the word, that's the inversion of a matrix. So the inversion of a matrix, and we've seen that, will actually get you that. Now the other thing that is interesting is, and this is how hierarchies actually work mathematically speaking, or one way to make them work, is if you have several objects, so if you have your hierarchy, and whatever your objects are in the scene, you might have something like A, B, C, and D, and they're all parented under each other, and they all have local transforms. So let's say that A is center word, or it's even our word. B is gonna have its own transform. Let's move it somewhere, maybe somewhere there. You know, if this is your word and A is here, then B might have been moved over here. That is gonna be a matrix because it's multiplied by the word. It's usually gonna be the local space and the word space of that thing are the same. Now, if that object has a child, and that might be, you know, couple joints or something like that. So let's say that you have a joint C and you have a joint D. Now, the relationship between B and C is going to be the local offset. And that is when you look at scale, rotate, translate, they represent that. Now, going back to Maya for a second, whenever you look at nodes for your transforms, we've seen the word matrix in so far. There's another one that you're often interested in, which is the Xor Matrix. And that is basically your local. That is equivalent. And there's matrix and Xor Matrix, and I think one of the two accounts for the pivot and the other doesn't. Verify that, don't take my word on it. If I need something local, I almost always just use the Xor Matrix. Now, and that represents this, translate, rotate, and scale. So that is your local space. Now, and it's expressed in terms of its immediate parent. Now, D gonna be the same thing. It's Xor Matrix is gonna be expressed in terms of its immediate parent. So what you want out of that, in a way, is like if you were to not have the word matrix, or if you needed to work with the local matrices in some form, and you wanted to find the word space matrix for C, then as we see in the inverse, the operation will be B has an Xor matrix, and we're gonna call it, let's say, MB, and C has a local. Sorry, I had to scratch my throat. C is gonna have its own local matrix, so the matrix is C. And if you wanted to find the word space transform of C, it will basically be the multiplication of those matrices. Now, these could be seen as a mistake going order like that, and let me explain. It depends on standards and order operations and all of that. So if you were to multiply C by B, then these local matrix multiplied by the parent matrix would actually get you the word space of C. And I'm not going to go into further detail than this, because all I want is I want to clean up the rig, but I am going to use a few of these operations, and I think that you need to know. Now, the interesting thing is that in many ways, the hierarchy is a lie. So people are used to seeing a hierarchy going in this direction. And I can do it. I can draw a straight arrow. No, apparently I can. There you go. People are used to seeing the hierarchy in this direction. So mentally speaking, you be tempted to do something like A by B by C by D to find the word space of D in example. You have to bear in mind that unlike algebraic multiplications, where you can invert the terms, that you can change the order of the terms. So A by B by C is the same as A by B. For matrices, that's not true. For matrices, the order matters. And the way you actually want to multiply things to find the word space is, okay, I have a local space of these. I want to multiply by the local space of these. And then I want to multiply by the local space of its parent, and so on until you reach the word, or which is usually going to be your ID matrix or your frame matrix. So what that means is that to find the actual word space for C, order matters. You don't do A by B by C. You actually do the matrix of C by the matrix of B by the matrix of A. And that will give you the word space to C. If all you have is locals, this is how you do it. Order matters. The direction of the hierarchy is the direction things are affected with, which is intuitive for people, but the way operations work, and this is true for a lot of stuff in OpenGL and word transposes and stuff like that, is actually in this direction. So chat, you remain my sounding board. Please peep up if any of this is not clear. In fact, even if it's clear, say something. I am gonna move on with this. So for now, that's all we want to know, that matrix multiplication gives you a succession of events. That inversion will give you, well, the inversion of the effort that it took to transform something to its current position and rotation and all of that, and that we can use those things together, and that order matters. That is actually pretty important. Come on. So moving on, the transform hierarchies light trademark. Do you always have to do the multiplication, or does Maya store the word space in an accessible way for all objects? So Maya, at any point in time, Maya will always give you in a convenient fashion, because it probably has an internal cache for it, the word matrix of anything and the word inverse matrix, as well as the parent inverse matrix and so on, which is very convenient. Especially the parent inverse matrix can let you make things hierarchy independent much more easily, because if you wanted to look at the parent to something for some reason, let's say these, and I had some node affected by both the parent and the local space of these for some reason, now if I reparented these and I was getting the parent matrix from these, then I would have to rewire the parent matrix. The fact that you can get it off the node itself, that it's always aware of its parent matrix, is actually quite convenient. It lets you build much stronger, tightly connected graphs. Now the part that is more interesting, like in knowing this, is not so much going like, oh, I can get the word matrix of any object if I chain enough items. No, you normally do what we've done in so far, which is you grab the word matrix directly. It's more interesting because sometimes you have a hierarchy of a couple of items, and maybe you don't want to transform one back into word space and then in some other parent space. Maybe you just want to get 2 jumps. So that's actually a pretty good question. It's more interesting, rather than finding the word space of D, we would do something like that, because maybe we're interested in finding, without going through the word space, the actual local offset from D to B. So instead of having D related to the parent C and C related to the parent B, instead of going from D to word and then finding it under B, which requires inversions, potentially multiple inversions, which are pretty expensive. Sometimes you just want to go, okay, I just want to get whatever got D from where it is relative to B. That means you can just consider these terms. In fact, you can consider just these 2 terms. Hopefully that makes sense. The other thing is that I think it's something that people should just know going into this. Experiment with it. I mean, feel free to look the algebraic side of it if you want. It's pretty straightforward. It's a lot of numbers, so it might seem intimidating, but it's it remains the same as vectors. It's just a lot of multiplications and additions, and then you just shuffle them in one direction first and in the other the second time, so that you get all the rows instead of getting just one vector. Now, for our use, it's enough to know just what they're doing. Now, one other point that I want to make before we venture into all of these, is, and this is true for code as well. I've said it before, like a phrase I really like, I heard some time ago, was like, I want us to write code that we're not afraid to change. I think that your rig should be the same thing. Like, you should be rigging things in such a way that changing the rig, if it takes you 10 minutes longer to rig a component that is easy to alter and reconfigure, spend those 10 minutes. They're always well spent. The other thing I like is the notion of split your prototype from your actual implementation. Like, don't constantly try to blend and save things from your prototype into your final implementation. Personally, I much rather people do the prototypes quickly and many times, and then they spend time on one clean implementation, rather than spending, you know, you never see it coming when it happens, but you think, oh, this prototype is almost there and I don't want to spend 2 hours nodeling stuff back together. And then inevitably, to clean something up that was in a prototype stage, you spend more time than you would have had if you went and actually cut all the connections and redid some of it from scratch. So in that spirit, what I actually want to do is, we got to a point where we sort of know I think we hooked these up, yeah. We sort of know that what we have works. You know, we got the planar constraint working, we got the IK working. I think I do have a blend that's not connected, it's just on the nodes. but we know that we can blend between the two items. We've hooked it up to the geo. All that we've done insofar has been very temporary. Some of it relies on the actual geometry hierarchy. I do not like that. I do not want that. So the first thing that we should actually do, and this is something where the component approach, I think, really shines, like isolating input and output properly. So body, pedals, cool. Spokes are closed, is if you've done things the right way. Now you have a lot of objects there, but everything you've been doing to connect to the mesh should actually only come out of the deform part of your components. So in theory, all the things that we might care about should be outgoing from there. So if I sever those, unless I possibly had something connected directly to the output, there should be no movement in the geo. Yep. So, and this is something that I actually quite like, the fact that you always know where the edges of your graph, where different parts of the graph, or different components, or where all the components go to the geometry, you always know where those edges are, and it's easy to disconnect or reconnect a bunch of things. So we're gonna ignore the geometry for a little bit, and we're actually gonna clean up all the stuff we've done. I will probably suggest getting yourself some tabs, like something one per component, and work in an orderly fashion through those. Again, disconnecting and reconnecting, probably a good idea. Don't be afraid of working, not quite from scratch, don't re-nodel everything, you know, at once, but don't be afraid to sever a bunch of connections and redo those. It's also good QC. It will tell you, it's sort of like going back through your code and refactoring it, doing what they call a port refactor. So you port your code to a refactor fashion, to a refactor form, instead of refactoring it in place. So pedals. Now that's the other thing we said. Our contract between the components is that everything that the pedals should be affected by, and we say we don't care about this. This is just a diagnostic item. Should in theory be connected through the input. Now nothing, if I have this selected, should be using them as output other than, let's do it, as something that is inside the component itself. So these are the objects I have. In theory, everything that is connected to this downstream should be in the component I'm using, and that seems to be the case. So this is going, so it's pedals, pedals, pedals. This is a recycle bit, and in a way this is bad. So this is not something, I mean, we've done it for practical purposes to get things going, but you can see here we actually have something that is non-ideal, because that says that that is part of the wheel. So if you name things semi-decently, you should be seeing some patterns in the names, and it becomes pretty easy to go, okay, I have some interaction between the items that are coming from the wheel and they're going into the pedals without going through my input interface. That is possibly a very bad thing. So, or in this case, I just duplicate the nodes, so that's not too bad. But yeah, then I just, you know, scratch that one off, but should name things properly. So we are correct. We only have input going to the inside of something, then going to the output. So that's good. Also means that we probably want to rename a bunch of things. So let's get onto that. You can rename things in a very, very, very temporary fashion if you want. That's perfectly fine. So we are gonna go through that. Now we've called these pedals component. This is the input, is fine as is. Now it's probably worth prepending your component to these things as well when you're trying to debug in the graph. So we extend our naming convention a little bit here. After all, nothing other than these components should be using this stuff. So pedal sem, word staff, that should all be fine. And if you've done things properly, you can normally walk from the input and on. Again, chat, you're my sounding board, so if you see anything off, if anything isn't clear, let me know. Now, I have these, and I had established them in a way as the word space. the offset for the center of the staff, so it would be the center for the pedals and the wheel both. And another one again, I had offset so that it will give me the shape of the pedals, which seems all correct. Let's also move stuff into its default space. So I should see word, center of the staff, and center of the pedal. So that looks in good order. The input is probably fine. The connection to these should be coming from these items, so from the master of that, and in this case it will be the offset. So that's also correct. Now what we want to do next is, and let's make sure that, yeah, we're in additive mode, which is convenient. And the other thing we want to do is pin all nodes by default, mostly because I don't like it. I don't like pinning all nodes by default, but in some situations Maya seems to teleport my nodes around a lot more than I'm used to be honest. So I can't deal with that again. The last stream it actually almost costed me my sanity. What little bit is left. Now control. The next thing we said is, okay, we're gonna have a buffer, so let's start adding that with just its input connections. And I strongly recommend developing some dexterity with the node editor, so learn the shortcuts, set good shortcuts for things that are not there, learn to click the right buttons or whatever, and trying to click stuff as much as possible. Normally I would just I'd be just punching in the buttons on the keyboard over the home row, but hopefully this makes it clearer to you guys what I'm doing. So grabbing just the outputs for this item goes like, okay, there's will and main control. Okay, we got to something, need to correct something here, we need to rename it for sure. So we have this is getting me my pedals, pedals middle, word to staff offset, and I'm extracting the word, so this is gonna be staff word, something like that. You can call these whatever you want, and for those that might have missed out on it, this is not a strong convention, but it's, you know, good enough to explain things on stream. Normally something is a factory node and you don't know what kind of stuff you want as extensions. I'll just use F node for factory nodes, a C node for custom ones. Now we're going out to the buffer for the whole lot basically, which seems sensible enough. And that should also, so verify things as you go. You can get yourself diagnostic objects if you want. So it's responding correctly to rotation and everything. This is being left behind, which seems okay for now. So that's pedal left and pedal right. We'll deal with that later, where that's the output. We haven't got to that edge yet. So we have these, then we know that we have a control here. Seems right. We're not doing anything fancy with limiting access or locking stuff for now. We're gonna let people roll whatever. Then we have a couple shapes. We're not interested in seeing those right now. Then we have say that we're gonna do pedal left and pedal right. So if we go from here and if you graph out, there's not gonna be anything because we're actually relying on the hierarchy for this bit. The relationship between a buffer and the child is one of the things where I'd say the hierarchy is a pretty valid way. It's fine to let the hierarchy establish that kind of thing. This is our orgy of unit conversion nodes. I don't care about the shape. So, okay, this is supremely useful. So let's actually be a little bit smarter about this because this is getting pretty inconvenient. So we said we got the pedals here that we're interested in. Don't want this yet. So let's just add that. What am I doing here? So back to it again. Let's try it one more time. Will main control pedal buffer. Don't care for that. We care for these. So we're gonna add these. Don't care about the shapes. You can actually turn that off. Where is it? Display no shapes. Now something quite nice here, if you put this as 0, whenever you bring something in, it's not going to bring in any of its connections. If you, and this is a little bit of a problem in a way, if you put it at 1, it will give you input and output connections. So as you change that value, you have to do a bit of nodelling. But if it's set at 1 and then you start going out, then you should only get its outputs. And you can keep walking your graph that way basically. So you got this much, and if you want to go 2 down, you can just select and go down again. So moving on. Unit conversion, thank you Maya. So mode double linear. Now what we were doing here with this one was we're doing something with the blend. Okay, so we'll keep that, and then we're gonna go output F node, so we probably want to see where that goes out. Okay, so it's another good thing to do, like keeping track of your word matrix, because that's normally a very meaningful connection. So we got to the control, we look at the word matrix, we're extracting it so it can be connected to something, and we're going straight to the actual pole SRT. That's good, we don't mind that. Now the other thing we might be interested in is since we have established a hierarchy for this that will be relative to how the geometry hierarchy is, if you have a decent enough contract of sorts with modeling, it's actually okay to use the hierarchy, so long as it's respected the same way modeling, or you're comfortable with like multiplying it where you need it. Now we seem to have 2 decomposed matrix here, so that's another thing to keep an eye out for. Now staves SRT, so we're doing the work twice, and this happens all the time when you're prototyping something, and we're going out to the staves and we're going out to the pole. We don't really need this duplicity here, and this is something where we're saying if you want to split how you connect things between your deform output and your actual component linking output, that's fine. I actually recommend that. What I recommend the most is not using your component output. Do not conflate these two basically. Do not have one item representing both. What doesn't really do, what isn't really necessary is using 2 decomposed matrix for what is the work of one. So we're gonna remove that. This is our very late edge that we're going out to, so we don't care until we encounter something else that we need to deal with. Now, but this we do want to take care of. So we say that we have the pedal staff, and we probably want more than just the scale and the translate. I think we were doing the rotation differently before. Yep. So pole SUT, that's fine. Let's get the rotate in there as well. Now that should fix, like before we had an issue, not an unexpected one, where doing that will not displace the geometry. It will just rotate it, and only straight up translation like that without rotation will get transmitted. We did expect that. We say we will fix it. We're basically doing this. So, and somebody was posting in chat the node editor hotkeys. Yeah, I redo those hotkeys, and I think I've mentioned it before. I don't want to move the webcam, but I basically pair a lot of these with the row of keys on my keyboard, except for these because the bookmarking is pretty messed up, with the row of keys on my keyboard above the home row. So, and it means that QWRTY will behave slightly differently if you do it that way, and you have a discrepancy between viewport and node editor, so up to you if you want to do it. Leave dangerously, I do. And pole SRT, we're fine with that. Now, the other thing we're interested in is trying and establish as simple an output as possible. So we said we're actually gonna be okay by putting the pedal left and the pedal right as child of these. That will simplify our life a little bit. So we might also be okay with doing the pedal right until the pedal left if we want the straight consequences, but we're not gonna do it just yet. Now, this means that our pedal left now, the one we want to go out for deformations, which is just rigid bindings in this case, it's a rigid transform, is gonna be, and this is something where the output as we've configured it might help us, is gonna be simply the offset that we have between, where is it? The offset that we have between the pedal itself and the actual center of the staff. So we have the pole sorted, and the offset that we want on the pedal left is gonna be coming from this. This is in relationship to something spaced like the staff, so we can actually do pretty well with that. And now this is where things get a little bit interesting, I guess. So because we've buffered this control, and this is why I wanted to introduce matrices, because we have buffered this control, if I was to just straight up, let me get the object I wanted. If I was to just straight up take the pedal left, undo that scale connection, which just comes from Maya doing the scale compensation stuff. If I was to do this, what I will get is, and that was already in that space, which is wrong, but if I did this, all I will get is, this will be right under its parent, and that's because the local transfer for this, we've buffered it, so it's always going to be basically starting at 0. So what we're interested in is getting the space of this control in the space of the staff, which is exactly what I was talking before. So what I actually want isn't the straight up connection, which would only work if the controller was unbuffered. What I want is to take this and go, okay, what would it be? Like, what is the unbuffered transfer for this? What if this was straight up under that parent? So that means that I do have an Xor matrix for this. And there is a mode matrix node in Maya. Whoops, not that one. So mode matrix. So yeah, we're doing this in time. So remember what I said about the order of operations mattering? Oh man, there's a few shortcuts I still need to do. So don't ask me why. There's a lot of nodes where they thought that the interface should be as impossible to deal with as possible, and some of the matrix nodes are one of those. So if you just use the 1, 2, 3, it's like they do not consider publish attributes, the ones that you actually really want all the time, the input. Anyway, and actually, I don't know, do we want to call it a tip? If you connect something this way around, then if there were already matrix connections to it, it will sometimes do a decent job of getting the next item in the array, but it will sometimes actually decide to recycle the first item in the array that you had actually used, which is pretty infuriating. So anyway, what I want to do is actually do the stuff I've been talking about for the last 5 minutes. So I am gonna take whatever this work is, which is gonna be local to the parent, and I'm gonna multiply, because I want it related to this and not to the word. I'm gonna multiply to the X form of its actual parent. So this is another thing that's sometimes, like for arrays that create ports dynamically, you will have to refresh that node before you see it. Otherwise you just see the 0 again. Yeah, you don't see the new entry in the array that you can use. So now if we do something like that, what we should have in theory, and this is where I was saying, remember the order is that way, we should actually have the position of this pedal relative to this object, because we have unbuffered it in a way. And that might or might work terribly, or might work great, we'll see. So we want another decompose matrix. If you get into writing nodes, one of the things I very strongly recommend is something that all the matrix nodes having a matrix to SRT, scale, rotate, and translate one-to-one, because these can be pretty annoying when you have to wrestle like dozens of them. So, and if everybody is a good boy or a good girl, and we will have more seasons, I will actually show you how easy it is to write nodes. It's up to you guys. Share, like, subscribe, follow, register, whatever, and it will happen. Now, okay, sure I could do that. Come on. Okay. And it might or might not have been the actual, okay. So no, the Xor matrix was clearly not what I wanted. Also the mode matrix decides not to show me these. So it means that we're just gonna use the plain one. Again, like standard Maya nodes, standard Maya stuff, you probably want to verify everything I tell you. Don't trust me. So the Xor Matrix is clearly the one referring to the pivots, and the normal matrix is the one that will get to the local transform. So go as, it only took us like probably 20 minutes. The beauty of first principles, they don't go quick if you also have to explain them. But now what we actually have is this object related to that unbuffered, tied to this object in relationship to this one, skipping the buffer. The magic of matrices. Is this faster than constraints? Yes, considerably faster. So we got that going. Cool, go as. Now pedal right, as I said, we'll see later on what we want to do with it. We're gonna ignore it for now. Hey Sergey, it's good to see you here, man. And Paul is good, this is good. What we want to move on to next is taking care of our output in a similar fashion. Now we say that we have the word staff offset, so that's the input, sorry. Output staves, so we're only outputting the staves for now from these, so you should be okay. And cool. All right, I reckon the debug layer, and that's the other reason to have the joints in a hierarchy sometimes. It's good diagnostic, and Maya will like you more. Maya doesn't really like you to have lots of joints in word space when you skin. In fact, it will hate you for it most of the time. Now, the next, sorry, just a sec. All right, so the next thing we want to take care of is actually having the blend that we were talking about. So right now we're going straight up from the staves control to all of this stuff. We want to be able to blend in our IK control. It's glorious, we want it. Now for the pedals, we have a couple of choices. We could actually choose to have the pedals being, depending on the IKFK, on the IKFK blend, switch between the FK staff and the IK control, or we could just double those up if you want this control to be straight up the pedals. Question in chat, why does Maya hate joints in word space? Okay, a couple of things. Having everything in word space might seem like a good idea, and it's actually okay. I quite like it to have, when I'm putting together components, as much as possible of it in word space. But what happens when you don't have that way to then connect that word space to some reference one, like in this case, if I was to work purely out of the word, all the way in and out, and ignore something like this, like not respace things to this, like maybe get the word space of this and multiply it by further word spaces or whatever. What happens is that when you go to 10,000 units somewhere in space, you start having serious floating point precision issues, like really serious ones. So word space, alternate space is like being able to reparent things without having to affect your actual outliner hierarchy by manipulating transforms is important, but you don't want to do an excessive amount of it, or do the thing where you move everything to word space and then everything back to some other space all the time, unless you know what you're doing. Obviously, like if you're working with things like OpenGL or shaders or deformer, stuff like that, there's a million other considerations that come into place. But when it comes to deformers that go into Maya, I found that precision creep, floating point precision issues and precision creep kick in pretty early. And if you have considerable amounts of rotation and you're far off in space, and God forbids you maybe even have scaling, like you can find things freaking out 10,000 units already, sometimes even earlier. So don't go overboard with it, I guess is what I'm saying. Like always do the minimum amount of operations that you can get away with. So now that I've completely lost my train of thought, okay, now The other thing I was saying is sometimes we want some sort of additional control over items, and I think that for the pedal blend I put one straight up here, which I do not like. It was just as a demonstration thing. So if I do this, I can probably find what I did. And for those of you that don't know what I'm doing, I'm literally just with a walk depth of 1, you can select stuff, press greater than, which will select stuff downstream, and then just graph the part that is downstream of it. And it's a pretty good way of discovering a graph in one direction. You can obviously do the same upstream if you use the less than symbol and the input 1. Now, so the buffer here and the buffer here. So what we were doing was counter rotating things by a blend node, by a blend attribute that was on the control itself. Now, if we want those pedals to be switchable between IK, FK, that's not good. We don't want our IK to depend on an attribute that is on the FK unless we can, if we can avoid it. So I'm gonna just splash those away for now. And feel free to always abuse liberally tabs in the graph editor. I always keep a few open to jump between. In this case, what I wanted to get out of these was select these, I've walked the graph in one direction, go somewhere else, clean it up, do back and forth, and make sure that your edges, like what comes after and what comes before, is exactly what you expect. Because if these were connected somewhere else, I might do damage to a part of the rig that I was not ready to clean up. So with all of that said, let's move back. It's like all of this nodeling and fixing while talking about is actually a pretty tough mental exercise. If you ever want to test how much you know of something, try and talk about whatever you're doing while explaining it to other people, and do it at the same time. It's the same with music. Like they say that you're only really good at some musical instrument if you can actually play it while talking to somebody about what you're playing. So, got these sorted, got the pedals disconnected, which is what we want. We don't care about these. So that should not be connected to anything anyway. Yep. And I want to delete that extra attribute, pedal counter rotation factor, giving it a friendly name. So what we actually might want here is something like a control panel. And I was trying to create controls and stuff like that off stream because it's boring as crap to see me doing that, but you might have to live with me doing one. So modeling toolset. Again, chat, you're my sounding board. If any of this doesn't make sense, I need you to tell me. Okay. So, come on. All right, so I'm just gonna use something like these. Makes sense. So I would say, look, I like ragging on Maya as much as the next person. In this case, to be honest, like the issues with things like floating point precision and stuff like that, it's not really Maya per se. I mean, they're pretty common in a number of scenarios, and like if you look even at just clipping planes, people set clipping planes on cameras to some ridiculous values like 0.00001 for the near clip plane, and the far clip plane is 10 million. And I've even heard somebody telling somebody else, "Oh, I know this trick. It's great. You always get your clipping planes. Everything is always seen." It's like, it's a terrible idea. It's not how floating point precision works. So Maya does an okay job of it. It doesn't hide anything from you, so it's very easy to shoot yourself in the foot really hard with Maya. That's my experience. So we're gonna call these, what do we want to call it, settings, still a type of control, and we're gonna use it for the pedals in general. So what I'm gonna do here, and you can do something like this, you can do something completely different, it's up to you. And let's say that we put these where the SRT buffer is. Yeah, sure. These should always be, you know, lined up relatively well. Actually, tell you what, let's do the thing properly. So what I'm doing here is, all I want is something that's easily accessible, that's external to FK and IK and stuff like that. And I want it to just generally follow whatever my component is going to be doing. And I want to dump controls that configure the component itself in there. At work, we call these, depending on what they affect, they might be panels or something else. But the general idea is, this is your console, this is your central switchboard that will configure what goes on in this component. I normally recommend making the distinction between a control one and a guide one. We don't have guide in here, but I think we mentioned it. If you want to split the part that configures your component for rigging and for interaction with other components, split. And you leave control to be entirely and solely what is animatable, I recommend doing that. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Now, again, let's stop the ado. So nothing preventing us from, I love how it also undocks my views every time I switch in and out of expert mode. That's a great feature. If you don't know this docking thing, if you've never seen it before, I think that's Maya 2017 only. It's called Workspaces, and it's basically Qt's dockable views. I quite like it. It's possibly my favorite feature for 2017, together with Match Transform. Works pretty well in general, at least in update 3. It's had a bit of a rough time in the beginning, but it works fairly well now. Now, this is only gonna host attributes that we want to use to change, to configure the component. So we don't really need to buffer it or anything. We just want it to be visible and selectable, but we don't want people to affect it. Which means I do have an input that should always be reliable, that I use to drive the two staves buffers, and that should be the staves staff offset. So let's do that. I actually already had it, already had the decompose for it. Okay. So again, chat, save my life. Let me know how this is going. I don't know how much nodelling people can take. I don't know how much blackboarding people can take. So I'm trying to do a bit of all of those and see how people respond. Your feedback actually matters, or I will at least pretend it does. So just 1 second. Because I know watching people modeling and sculpting as these, same as doing UVs, I guess, as these cathartic kind of pleasure for some people. I don't know how much nodeling of rigs people can actually take though. So what am I doing here? Oh, this is just, I'm stupid. So what I actually wanted was the word of the staves offset. I don't know why I picked that. It's also very, very hard to do these and not use my normal language, which is a lot less polite and includes a lot more swear words than I'm actually using on the streaming so far. That's probably the second hardest thing in streaming. So either everybody's fallen asleep, which is very possible, and then I know that we need to do less nodeling, or everybody's absolutely in a rapture at looking at all of these. All right, lots of time. I'm always impressed with presenters. Yeah, it's incredibly hard not to swear. It does not come easy. I can tell you that. So, man, this is painful. I should have done this off stream. This is why I normally do these things off stream. It's painful for me to do it. I can only imagine how painful it must be to watch it. So whatever you want this to be, I mean, seriously, just something somewhere that people can select to put attributes on. This is all it needs to be, and these do a disproportionately long amount of time to do it. Also, clicking everywhere. You know, I've already said it's kind of tricky, but it's interesting having to talk over everything you do to not make stuff too boring. It's relatively hard, but when you're doing trivial stuff, it actually keeps you entertained in a way. But when you're doing the tougher stuff, it gets a lot harder. Get one of the split buttons like they have on American broadcast. Yeah, the thing is they have somebody else. They have I think they have a slight delay, and they have somebody else whose job is literally to be there and press that button just in time to catch that swear word in the delay. They probably have multiple people to do it if there's a fairly sweary crowd. So what we say we wanted to do is, okay, we definitely want an IKFK blending on this thing. We definitely don't want people to mess with the rotate, scale, translate of all of these. Visibility, you know, people might want to control it or not, so come on. This is one of those cases where I could go, sure, lock and hide the selection, who cares? Sometimes it's okay to do that because it's your interface, and in this case you want to go, this should never be touched, this is purely select and see what attributes you have, and that's it. And this is the shape, which you don't care about. And next, let's add the attributes. So what we want is, let's say that we do the IKFK blend starting. So think about it when you name attributes, whether you want 0 to be FK and 1 to be IK, and get some consistency. Let's say that I want 0 to be FK and 1 to be IK, then I will do something like that. And is it a blend? Is it a switch? We're gonna make our life a little bit easier and make it a switch in this case. Now, if you don't give these things, like if this is a boolean, you don't have the problem. But if this was a float, if you don't give things a range, they don't get a slider, just so you know. I know it's caught some people by surprise in the past, so let's add that. And we said we wanted the pedals to counter rotate. Yeah, let's say we keep that a boolean as well. And what do we call them? Word align or gravity align. We want to be sassy. And then some animator will go, what's gravity? I'm gonna pay for that at some point, I'm sure. So, okay, we got the stuff, we're good. In fact, who cares about the visibility being available? Let's at least hide it. Now, we got there, FKIK. We definitely want to implement FKIK first. Well, I want to. So we did have these working provisionally, and we do have this stuff driving an unim blend, which should be orphan right now. So again, get yourself a new tab. This is only receiving inputs. Useless, pretty much useless. Well, we might keep these for reference as we do things, but if you were doing a fairly thorough cleanup, then you probably will want to get rid of those and redo the stuff you're doing. Now, what we do care about should be the buffer of these. So there's two ways you can do a switch in this case. And what am I looking at here? Okay, there's two ways you can do a switch here. You could choose to take, like, completely mobilize these or unreference their space or something like that. Or you could choose to blend what affects the form in this case. And if we had an output that was dependent on how much they spin, which we will probably have for the wheel, then you will want to connect that the same way. So let's say that we actually blend to what our output is. Right now we said, okay, we have this staff pretty much one-to-one. We're decomposing and connecting the pole this way. Now, this in turn, do we want it to be movable? Do we not want it to be movable? If we want it to be movable, then fine, we need to take into account the translation as well and blend that. If we did not want it to, then lock it away, hide it, or whatever. But most important, in that case, get the translation not from these objects, but from whatever sources that control, so that if you ever need to redo the control layout, you can change it quickly. All right, so blend node, additive rotation. This seems good enough. I think we had the IKFK setup working to that as well. Let's see. We probably added upstream of it. Yep. So we have angle between, and that might have gone. So, okay, P-node nodes has decided to turn itself off. Sure, why not? So angle between the vector product, let's keep seeing where we end up. I think our setup should still be fairly healthy for that. And move these out of the way. All right, so we have these. We're doing the whole mode matrix, decomposing vector product. Oh, and I need to talk about the vector length before. And we're going in with that. That means that in theory, if this works the way we thought it would, we should be able to keep all the stuff we've added and go out with the output to the rotation again. Okay, that is, so the joint is, you know, an right diagnostic in this case, and we were using the weight here to negate, I think. Okay, so the good news is that now that we've rewired things properly, we probably don't need to, no, we still do. We will need to fix the rotation for that, because what is happening right now is one of the items, it's basically clockwise versus counterclockwise. So this is correct, but what we're getting out of it, where it should be 180, it's actually 0 and vice versa. So let me check the chat. All right. Again, guys, I'm relying on you to let me know how this is going. So we're about 1 hour in. Let's see if we can get the pedals fixed up now that we have that for the cleanup stage. So maybe another 10-15 minutes. And then we'll probably go into Q&A. Now, I challenged the internet to get me a certain amount of retweets and viewers to see if I will do a bonus stream tomorrow. The internet has let me down. I did mention the calendar before. Keep an eye on that. I might still do an extra stream tomorrow if I don't have anything more interesting to do in the morning. And if I do, I will put it on the calendar just because I want to move ahead with finishing nodeling together the rig. Now, angle between, we have this vector, which was, so this is the part where I just cannot make this exciting. I'm sorry. There is no way for me to make this exciting. I'd be tempted to do it off screen, whichever, to be honest. So vector product, am I missing a couple nodes here? It's possible, isn't it? So okay, I have these. I have put it in the space of the staves, and I'm getting its translation, which should be that, and that's correct. And then I was doing the angle between two items. So I was doing the angle between, yeah, the y-axis, okay. And that was because I thought the default of this was supposed to be there. So okay, so we're doing the angle between these and the -1 in y, and then the rotation is basically the one that needs to be negated. So that way it should be going back to working. So this is one of the reasons why I like to do these kind of cleanups where you disconnect a few things and then you have to go back for it, because you have to re-explore your logic and make sure that everything was in order. So because of clockwise, counterclockwise, which is purely depending on which of the two directions you basically choose as dominant, eventually I'll go into it, right-handed, left-handed matrices and stuff like that, not just yet. So good chance to actually do a little bit of work to make sure that we understand the next time around what we're doing. So this is only looking at pedal stuff. That's good. It means we want to rename it, and that is taking the pedal IK control and localize it to the stave, to the staves, yeah, to the staff space. So let's call it localize pedal to staff, and F node. So this is just a decompose for that, but for the sake of ordering things, you know, it would be a good idea to actually recycle these other way around. So I'm being fairly liberal with this part of the naming convention for now. I haven't quite decided what I want to do for the DG nodes on stream. I have several things that I've tried in the past. Inevitably, like DG nodes, you have to be very, like, the names tend to blossom because a rig might have, you know, 10,000 of the, well, maybe not 10,000, but a fairly complex rig might have close to 10,000 DG nodes in it. And this one is the one that gets us the angle between, so that was, that is our respaced axis. So that's the pedals axis, basically, which is, or rather, yeah, that's the pedals axis. So let's call it that. And let's do the factory node lazy thing. And then we go pedals sim, IQ pedals, projected angle, not a great node, but for now will do. So again, if I wanted to know that this is an angle between nodes, I would just look at the attribute editor, look at the icon if it has one. So that's why I don't name stuff with the type of the node that I'm using in it. So just the one person in chat that didn't fall asleep was saying that they don't mind seeing the unglamorous stuff in people's workflows. Look, this is something, well, don't copy what I do, just spend time at home doing this kind of stuff yourself. Develop dexterity with the node editor for sure. And that will pay off, I can promise you that. And it's also how you learn these things. Now, if I was doing it for myself, I reckon this whole rig with all the features that I plan to have by end of season will probably take maybe 3 or 4 hours. Talking about it and having to explain everything as I go, you know, that's gonna take a little bit longer. So finally, we're going back to hooking things up. Now we say that we're gonna do the FKIK switch. Now we got the blend working for us so that we can actually blend this node. That's great. Now what we want to do is we want to balance. This is a switch, so we have a pretty easy time. We don't need to do anything special. But what we want to do is, if it's FK, and I hope there's no Boolean logic nodes in my either. Yeah, no, there's not. So what you could do, if you had a more straightforward set of values to use, is if you take the FKIK switch, and somebody was saying the revert node. So one thing, booleans, they're basically ints which can be cast to double or float. So it's actually pretty easy to do something like take the FKIK switch in FK. So when that switch is on, we know that we want this way to be on. We want it to be at 1. So this not doing it, right? We want to negate that so that the boolean is false. Now this is where we go, what will the reverse node do for us with the boolean? We will find out right away. See, if this was a proper show, there will be a commercial break. So, okay, the revert in this case is giving us a 1+, yeah, it's negating the boolean. So I've had this discussion, and well, I haven't had it in the comments, but people mentioning in the comments, so the reverse order is actually 1-. And so did somebody else say. Now the reverse node for me seems to be doing different things depending on what's hooked up. So if I hook up something to the compound port, translate directly, what I get is the straight up negation of it, which is nothing like the reverse of something. If I hook up a boolean, I get what is basically the proper reversion of something, which is not the inversion. The inversion of something is 1 divided by the term you're inverting. So I don't know if it's a node that has type checks or something. This should not be able to fetch as a type check, but it does very different things for me depending on what I am actually doing. So the other thing we're interested in is now if we switch that and to channel box editor, now that should get us the IKFK switch. Now this is not negating the second part that we say we wanted to negate. So that is where we need a mode double linear or equivalent, whatever you want to use. And that should basically see us through this exercise. And there you go. So we connected this straight weight A, which should be, it doesn't matter, does it? So this is the one we actually want to negate, which was the first one. So I don't want the reversion, do I? I actually want the straight up. So I'm loving this. I'm getting 1 multiplied by, is this a mode double linear? Oh yeah, there you go. I'm just stupid. I've done this before. I've used the pass-through instead of getting the output. Again, not glamorous, but that's the life of a nodeler. So with that, we should actually have IK, we should have the FK, we have stuff properly named around, and we should have a working switch for this. Yep, there you go. You can tell by the join. Cool. All right, I was hoping to get a little bit more than just the pedals done, but this is the process. So what time is it? Yeah, 3 minutes to Q&A. So start preparing your questions. If you have any, I'm sure there will be a deluge of them. Chat isn't super busy today. And this is, I don't know, I guess in a way this is rigging. This is probably the most rigging we've done on a stream. Rigging without the writing code part is a lot of nodeling and naming things. If you do it professionally, I can promise you there's a lot less talking about it as you do it. Unless you're a particularly chatty person, which most of your colleagues will find incredibly annoying, so don't do it. So pedal sim, this is a negation. And it's just a factory node. So what are we negating actually? We were negating the FK. Sorry, were we? Yeah, we were just negating the FKIK with this. Yes, and this one is basically a Boolean not. So we're gonna call it that. I mean, so that's actually not FKIK switch. If you don't do any development and all of this is unfamiliar to you, name them something that you understand. This is something that I understand, and I will hope that somebody will pick up rig from me would actually understand. Might or might not work out for you. So next, staves SRT. Now we have that IKFK working something sweet. I don't know if we actually have the translation going as it should. Yeah, we do. That's cool. Now the staves, which is what we want to go out from to the wheel. The pedals are not done yet. We'll do that the next time, unless there's absolutely zero question, in which case I'll bleed into it. For the actual output of the staves after they've been rotated, which is what the wheel will be interested in, we will... Oh, it's so painful working at this resolution. I do not know how 1080p single screen people do it. You're martyrs, guys and girls. So output B for the blend, and that should be it for the pedals component. We've taken care of the form part. We have not taken care of these, which is bad name wise. I mean, it works. And we have both our interface for deformation as well as the deformation for other components working. So No questions? Do we keep going with these and hook a couple more things? Seriously, guys. So this is the blend for rotations, and that is the literal FKIK rotational blend. I also realized I had not saved for an hour and 20 minutes. Go me. We've been graced. We have really been graced this time around. I mentioned it at the beginning of the stream. I like to live dangerously. No questions, so let's see if we can actually hook up a couple things. I'm also getting a little bit tired and a little bit scratch throaty. All right, and we're back on. So, petals all decompose. What were we doing with this stuff? Oh, yeah, this is what I was showing before, which we actually like. Well, I like it, and I want to keep it. So this is also staying in, which means it also needs naming something somewhat sensible. Come on. And that means that this is basically taking this and multiplying it by its parent so that you get the unbuffer space. Probably not a bad name for it, so we'll go petal Sam, petal left, unbuffered, and what we want to get out of it is a matrix. I know this is a factory node elsewhere, but that's I find these more useful, especially with nodes that don't have icons. I find that a lot more useful. Now this is a semi-decent name to recycle bits off. Come on. To recycle bits off for these. So this is just a change in type. SRT we actually use for the hierarchies. Pedal left, unbuffered. Yeah, we're gonna keep that. See, this is, what is it? I think I've used something like Matrix to SRT for this stuff before, maybe elsewhere. Now the last one I wanted to do is, this is the pedals, this is for the wheel. So what is this going out to? What else? So this is going to the staves SRT and to the post. So this is correct. Sorry for the scratch, which means it's just named wrong, and this should be the word of that. All right, that's like watching somebody renaming variables, I guess. It must be absolutely thrilling. So sure, let's say that this is word matrix. We're being pretty liberal. So that's for the control, yeah. It's actually for the staff, and we don't care that it's the control because it's kind of our result. So let's get rid of these, and let's say that it's that for now, because it's also going straight up to stuff that is for the staff. All right, so make it time, hour 20 minutes. I reckon that we have enough here. Like we've shown enough cleanup procedures that I can either do further cleanup or stuff like that off stream if we want to save some time and get into more interesting things, or the next time I can talk about it less and breeze through the other components. This is also for now probably the most complex component that we have. There you go, we hook the wheel again, which is probably good. Then yeah, so let me know what you guys thinking. What do you guys want to ask or want to know? Because otherwise I am gonna call these, because this seems like a good moment to call it. Yep, this is our switch working. We're doing great. Chat is super quiet. Again, it's usually a really good sign or a really bad sign. I am choosing to consider it a really good sign. All right, guys, I'm gonna call it on this. It's been good. We got 1 hour 20 minutes without crashes. It might crash on save now. No, it didn't. So thanks everybody for watching. I am gonna get these on YouTube right away, so probably be there in an hour, and it should be available in the VODs if you want to. If you came in on the stream late, VOD is now available. I keep the last stream in there, so between when a video is up on YouTube and the actual stream that is on Twitch on the channel, you can go on video on demand, and the last stream should always be available. Sometime more than just the last one, but I want the offline, like the off-stream views to go to YouTube, not to Twitch, so I'm normally gonna drop them once they're up on YouTube. So thanks everybody for attending, thanks everyone for watching if you're on YouTube, and I keep an eye on the calendar. If you're on the stream or if you're watching this the same day it comes out, keep an eye on the calendar. I might or might not stream tomorrow. If you follow me on Twitter, I'm always going to announce there with some forewarning. See you.